Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1993 horror comedy, Hocus Pocus. Now, this is the anniversary edition. This is the Target limited edition. This one comes with the slipcover and has a case here underneath it that has some more artwork. And then has the disc as well as a gallery book with behind the scenes anecdotes and behind the scenes photos and stuff. And this has original cover art by Drew Struzan, which he's a legend in the film poster arena. So it's really cool to see a release like this with the original poster art. And there was a steelbook the scalpers got really engorged over in terms of potential prospects, but I didn't really care about that. I went with the anniversary edition because I just like the cover art for this better than the steelbook, which looks like the book from the film, which to me is just the Great Value Necronomicon. That's really what it is. But anyway, let's get to the film, shall we? Now, as you all know, if you follow my channel, I did do a review of this, but something happened to it, so this is a new review. This is the replacement. Now, and I'm glad that happened because it ends up working out in the long run, because my opinion on the film has changed. Now, I don't hate the movie. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's a film where, oh, I only liked it because of nostalgia. I still like Hocus Pocus. I still think it's a fun, entertaining movie. But I'm not in love with the film as much as I used to be. After this most recent viewing on Halloween, I just noticed so many things that I just didn't feel worked, and a lot of missed opportunities, and overall a film that there is a lot of fun to be had, but there's a lot of moments in it that are honestly pretty irritating. And I can see why the critics weren't really that fond of the film when it came out. I can see why there was mixed reviews after watching it again, because it's a film that I think a perfect way to describe Hocus Pocus is that it's a sugar rush. It's a cinematic equivalent of a night of binging on Halloween candy, and then the day after you feel sick and you don't want to do it anymore. You don't want any more candy. You're done. That's the prime example of what it's like watching Hocus Pocus. It's frantic. It's high energy. It's you got all this sugar going through your veins, and then you crash afterwards, and then you're like, I don't want to do this again until next year. And that's honestly exactly how I feel about Hocus Pocus. I don't have any desire to watch this again until next Halloween, or maybe not even then, maybe the Halloween after next. It's one of those films that it's definitely an acquired taste, and for some they can't get enough of it, and for others they still like it, but they've had their fill. And that's how I feel about it. I've definitely had my fill of Hocus Pocus. There are other films that are that lean towards young adults that I feel handle the horror elements a lot better. The Monster Squad, even something like Casper, the Addams Family movies, and those are ones that honestly I'd probably choose to watch again over Hocus Pocus, because it's just one of those films that there are certain elements to it that are just so annoying, and the high energy can get a bit old after a while, and I definitely don't feel the film is as funny as it could be. In fact, I think a lot of the gags and jokes are pretty lame. I also feel that in terms of the horror elements, they're almost non-existent, and that's honestly disappointing, considering that there is potential here for a equally as effective horror film for kids as a comedy and as a Disney movie. But Disney just seemed to just go with, well, it's a traditional Disney fairy tale, but with some young adult elements and just a little bit of creepy stuff. But I mean, even the stuff that's in this isn't that creepy. I've seen scarier episodes of Goosebumps and that's saying a lot. It really is. There's a zombie in the movie. Well, there's the zombies in the Thriller music video are scarier than the zombie in this movie. Nothing against Doug Jones, he did a great job, but still, I mean, it's one of those things where the scariest thing about this film is the idea that the Sanderson sisters are stealing children's souls. That's the scariest thing about the film, and I give Disney credit for actually going there. That being said, it seemed like they're just trying to be posers with the screenplay. Oh, look, we're cool and we're hip, virgins. We're gonna talk about breasts and call them yabos and other shit, and and we're gonna make pop culture references. And it's just one of those things where I just feel that Disney, if they were gonna do this, and they could have nailed it, but I feel they rushed it. This seems like a rushed script. There are plot conveniences in there in this script that are just too huge not to miss. The only reason why the Sanderson sisters even came back is because Max was a dumbass and was like, well, I'm going to prove to you that this flame doesn't do anything. And even though people are telling him don't do it, he's like, well, whatever, I'll do it anyway. And then by the end, the only reason why the Sanderson sisters get the book back and are able to do anything is because teenagers being dumb again. So it's just, there's just too many plot conveniences with teenagers being dumb teenagers. And maybe if the film had these other elements that were stronger, that wouldn't bother me so much. But after watching it again and comparing it to these other films with this type of tone and with this type of approach, it's just really glaringly obvious, and it's a pretty big flaw. It also contributes to a very critical flaw in the film, the lack of intimidation factor, the lack of stakes. It just feels like the film's kind of going through the motions for a good majority of the running time. It's kind of muddled. The climax is honestly pretty, fun, but it's just one of those things where I don't feel the film did a good enough job at making the Sanderson sisters good antagonists. They're bumbling around like idiots for the majority of the running time. They're about ready to give up until the teenagers decide to be dumb teenagers and open up the book and send a beacon up into the sky that they can follow. It's one of those things that's like, if you're going to try to have these characters be a threat, then make them a threat. Don't do like, oh, well, last minute they're a threat now because Sarah Jessica Parker's singing in the sky and sending kids towards their doom. It's like, okay, that's nice. But what about before, when they're running around like Bulk and Skull? It's like, I don't understand how that is going to make your antagonists worthy antagonists. They're like the Three Stooges if they're witches. It just doesn't really... It's one of those things where I just don't think it works. And especially if you're trying to be... If you're just doing a comedy, then just be a comedy. But if you're trying to be a horror comedy adventure, you can't have antagonists that aren't very antagonizing. They're not very believable antagonists. And the Sanderson sisters just aren't. Even though they take souls from children, other than that, they're bumbling around and tripping over their own feet, and they don't know how to handle modern day, and so on and so forth. So the film is directed by Kenny Ortega, and Kenny Ortega is another thing about this film that I feel is a letdown. Kenny Ortega is a TV director, and it shows. There are multiple scenes in this film, especially the Halloween party scenes with the adults, that looks like something straight out of a Disney Channel original movie. It seemed like Disney just settled for Kenny. He did Newsies the year before, and so they just thought, well, he'd do good here because Bette Midler is a singer and da-da-da-da-da, and so on and so forth. And in that respect, the one dance number was well shot and well done. But any other sequences, like stuff that's shot in the house or outside during the trick-or-treating stuff, even in some aspects of the climax in the graveyard, it's just very stock, very standard direction. There's not a lot of style and there's not a lot of flair to it. The best looking shots, I don't feel I honestly, from what I've seen, I doubt Kenny Ortega is the one responsible for them. I would say that the best looking shots were more the work of the cinematographer Hiro Narita or second or third unit directors who were directing the visual effects sequences. Because I just don't really see Kenny Ortega, of all people, the guy who's known for the High School Musical films later on, lending a hand in a way to this production that elevates it to a whole different or better level. And I got nothing against Kenny Ortega. I just feel that this is just a huge missed opportunity by Disney. Mick Garris is featured in the credits, and I feel he would have been a better choice for director. He definitely knows how to handle horror, that's for sure. And if you ask me, Disney, I would have loved to have seen them get Joe Dante. Joe Dante, I feel, would have been the perfect guy for this type of movie. And can you imagine a horror comedy for Disney directed by Joe Dante? The guy who did Gremlins and The Burbs. That would have been awesome. That would have been really fun to see. And I don't know if he was busy. I don't know if Disney didn't even bother. I don't know what was going on. But Joe Dante still would have been a nice pick. I think he might have been doing Matinee. But I don't know for sure. But there had to be better directors for this type of film than Kenny Ortega. And that's another reason why the film is just it's fun, it's entertaining, but it could be so much more, and it isn't. And the reason why is because Disney's just settling for average directors like Kenny Ortega. The script by Neil Cuthbert and Mick Garris. I don't know how much of this script is actually written by Mick Garris, because Mick Garris wrote a script called Halloween House, and it was bought by Disney in 1984, and they were planning on optioning it. They were going to make a movie out of it, or maybe do a TV movie, but nothing ever happened with it. It sat on the shelf for years until they decided to retool it into what would become Hocus Pocus. So I don't know how many elements or how many aspects of his script are in the film and how many aren't. But, I mean, Mick Garris has done some bad stuff in the past, and he probably is not done doing that. He's not perfect, but I still can't help but really be curious about the Halloween House script. Maybe it would have been something like Monster House, but in 1984. Maybe it would have been kind of like something like Explorers or The Goonies, but with monsters and kids, and maybe kind of something like the Monster Squad. I would have been up for that. A Disney sort of Monster Squad type movie. That would have been fun. Hocus Pocus is still a fun movie, but you can tell it's kind of a rushed concept because it only came to be because the producer, David Kirshner, who also helped write the story, he had an idea that came into his head because he was staying with his daughter on, I think it was on Halloween night or some other night, and saw a black cat stroll by. And so we thought of a story idea that, wow, what if a teenager was turned into a black cat by these evil witches? And then that turned into what would eventually, of course, become this movie, Hocus Pocus. And it just seems like Disney was like, oh, we like that idea. And so they started putting that on the fast track. And then they didn't really have as much time to write dialogue or do other aspects of the story. So they just kind of just whipped something together and then did the best they could with it. And weren't even really looking at this film as something that was going to be super successful. I mean, if you look at the advertising, it's not like it was like advertised constantly. But they did definitely think it would have done okay because they did not want to release the film in October, which would have been a better time, because they didn't want it competing with A Nightmare Before Christmas, their other Halloween-themed film. But releasing it in the middle of the summer, it was just a bad time for a movie like this. And it didn't do that great, critically or financially. It cost $28 million and it made $39 million. So it made a okay profit, but for Disney, that's pretty disappointing, because The Rocketeer also made a profit, if I remember correctly. It didn't completely tank in the theater. It wasn't a total flop, but it also was just a middling success. It cost $35 million and only made $46 million. So Hocus Pocus made a profit, but for Disney, it wasn't that much and was pretty disappointing. Now, it's only now that Disney is now super into Hocus Pocus, because now they've picked up on its popularity and its cult following. But when the film came out, they weren't that happy with the box office receipts. And I mean, you could argue that maybe they weren't expecting it to do that well anyway, so it making any profit was a surprise, or was something that was welcomed. But at the same time, Disney is a company, especially at this time, that did not look favorably at films that did not make enough of a profit for their company. So Disney probably thought this was just going to be a film that would just be forgotten about, and maybe a few people would remember it because they saw it when they were a kid, and they didn't expect it to become this ginormous success. So much so that they actually have the Sanderson sisters, I think, in one of their shows at one of the parks. So they've definitely caught on and jumped on the Hocus Pocus bandwagon, so to speak. And that's cool. I mean, because it's nice that the fans get something from Disney for once. Because as a fan of The Rocketeer, I get nothing but a shitty anniversary edition that shouldn't even be called an anniversary edition. Because all it is the film in widescreen in the proper format that it should be. It's a non-anamorphic widescreen, and it's an HD, and there's a trailer. But, you know, with Hocus Pocus, we at least get the featurette from back in the day on here. And you also get I think it's called like a Trick or Treat edition thing, which is like a picture-in-picture version of the film, which has some interviews and stuff. And the interviews are nice, but I hate picture-in-picture shit. I wish Disney had an option just to watch those features separately, because that was just annoying. But that's just a tangent. But I had to mention that. So yeah, didn't do that great. And but I feel it might have done better if Disney just put some more effort into this script, so it wasn't as rushed. Definitely had some dialogue punched up, and threw in some genuine scares and chills here, because I've been to neighborhood haunted houses that have been scarier than Hocus Pocus. Now, it stars Bette Midler, who plays Winifred Sanderson, and according to Bette, this is her favorite film, one of her favorite roles. I could kind of see it. There's kind of a Broadway-esque sort of thing about it. I personally thought her performance, though, is just... She's having fun, I get it, but it's very hammy. It's incredibly hammy. And I just feel like it was too much ham. And I like ham, but this is too much. Kathy Najimy is also in the same boat. Way too much ham, way too much mugging for the camera with her facial expressions and woo, and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's kind of annoying and irritating. Imagine just people talking in silly voices and just going woo, it get a little old after a while. And they definitely were like the Three Stooges, smacking each other and shit. Sarah Jessica Parker, she plays Sarah Sanderson. She's the younger, prettier sister. She's the best out of them. Her energy to me was genuine. Her energy was fun, and it was childlike almost, and when you break down her character, she's just a bimbo, really. She's the bimbo witch, but I still like the fact that Sarah Jessica Parker really relished her role. And yeah, it helped too that she was drop dead gorgeous and probably the hottest she's ever looked on film, but you could tell that there's definitely personality there. She wasn't trying too hard, and it just seemed like it came naturally. With Kathy Najimy and Bette Midler, it just seemed like it didn't come naturally to me, and they were just hamming it up. They were just mugging for the camera. They were just trying too hard to be funny and over the top, and I saw right through it. And after a good chunk of time, it got really old. Omri Katz plays Max Dennison. Now, Omri Katz would actually go on, I believe, after this to be in Eerie, Indiana, which is a prime example of a story that has horror elements that's intended for kids and teenagers that works. It's a very underrated show. It's got genuinely creepy, eerie moments in it. Stuff that Hocus Pocus sorely needed. It was missing that aspect of it. It's got this horror aspect, but it doesn't do that much with it. It could do so much more with it, and it does the bare minimum. Now, Thora Birch is also in this before she would go on to be in other movies and so on and so forth. She plays Danny. She was a bit too shrill at times, and there were moments where she also got on my nerves. But overall, I could deal with her. Vinessa Shaw as Allison Watts. I thought she was great. I really liked her in this. Arguably, she's the best character in the film. Sean Murray plays Thackeray Binx, the human version, but he's dubbed by Jason Marsden, who, if you're a Disney fan, you might recognize that voice because he did the voiceover work for Max from a Goofy movie, which is kind of interesting. There's a character named Max Dennison, and Binx is voiced by Max from a Goofy movie. And that's another film that has a cult following, and I don't know what you're doing, Disney. Can I get an anniversary edition or a Blu-ray of a Goofy movie, please? Thank you. I can buy a T-shirt with Powerline on it at Walmart, but I can't find the film in widescreen on Blu-ray. Come on, Disney. And Doug Jones is also in this. He plays Billy Butcherson, who's the zombie. He looks like Johnny Depp from Edward Scissorhands. I mean, there is no way that the people who did this design and Disney weren't like, yeah, make him look like Edward Scissorhands, because he looks exactly like Edward Scissorhands, a zombie Edward Scissorhands. Doug Jones has got great energy, and he's one of the best in suit performers out there, and he showed it even here early on in his career. But the character isn't much of anything. And so it's fun to have a zombie character, but Charles Rocket, he plays Max and Danny's father. He's just a lame dad, 90s dad. There's nothing to him. Stephanie Faracy plays their mother. There's not a whole lot to her either, and her performance, it's just there. And other than that, I mean, there's a few other actors and actresses. I mean, Gary and Penny Marshall, they were in this as they were uncredited, but they were in this as the devil and the devil's wife, and that was a fun sequence. And there's Larry Bagby, who plays Ice, the leader of this group of teenage douchebags who were giving Omri Katz's character a lot of shit throughout the movie. And those guys are just like, man, whatever. Typical teenage a-holes. That's really what they are. Just typical teenage assholes. Asshole bullies. And yeah, I mean, that's honestly the bulk of the cast that really means anything. And, I mean, performance-wise, I mean, for the most part, people were serviceable, but, I mean, just Bette Midler and Kathy Najimy, they were on the screen for a good amount of the time, and they're hamming it up so much, they're chewing the scenery so much that I by the end of the film, there wasn't much left. Now, the film features a score by John Debney. Now, John Debney had to compose the score in 2 weeks because James Horner was initially the one that was asked to do this, but he couldn't do it. So John Debney was hired, and the score's fine. It fits the film well. But interestingly enough, the best piece of music, the Come Little Children song that Sarah Jessica Parker's character is singing to all these children while she's flying on her broom and singing to the kids and hypnotizing them, it was composed by James Horner. He came back and did that little piece of music. So I could definitely say that the score might have been a lot better and even more memorable if it was entirely composed by James Horner. But John Debney did a fine job. It added some nice energy and life to certain sequences. But the Come Little Children song is easily the best bit of music in the entire film. Now, cinematography by Hiro Narita I thought was pretty impressive at times, especially the shots that were taking place in Salem and the graveyard and other places. I love the use of lighting. I think the film did a great job using greens and purples and stuff like that to create certain atmosphere. The editing by Peter E. Berger, it's I wouldn't say it's excellent or amazing, but it's definitely above average. The film is 96 minutes. It goes by at a decent pace, but at times you could argue that it goes by a little bit too fast. Like it could have used a little bit of some time where it kind of stopped and let the characters have some more growth and some more time with one another. But I mean, that's just a little nitpick. Overall, I think the pacing is pretty solid. The thing that hurts this pacing the most is that majority of the film is just the witches just being bumbling goofs and trying to find their book. So, I mean, that and they're getting outsmarted by a bunch of kids. So, that's something that hurts the pacing because, like I said, the stakes just never feel high enough. They never feel high enough in this film. Other thing I want to mention real quick about the film is definitely the visual and practical effects. I think the flying scenes are really well done. Anything that deals with green screens and stuff like that is handled expertly and very efficiently. The zombie makeup that Doug Jones wore, even though he looked like zombie Edward Scissorhands, it was still really good makeup. The effects work, though, by Rhythm and Hughes, who did the CGI on Binx's mouth, the cat's mouth, so when it talked. Did not age well. That does not hold up well, especially on Blu-ray. Now, when you look at, I mean, the Blu-ray is a pretty solid transfer, and a lot of the colors and all of that really stand out when you watch the film on Blu-ray. But so does some really dated CGI, and that is some really dated CGI on the face of the black cat, Binx. And I just definitely want to mention the Binx. I mean, in terms of like one of the best aspects of the plot is Binx. I think Binx, I mean, David Kirshner had the right idea. I think that's a really cool idea to have a teenager who's double-crossed by these witches and he's turned into a cat, and until they are vanquished and until they are stopped, he lives forever as this cat. I think that's a really inspired concept. I just wish that the stuff with the Sanderson sisters was taken a little bit more seriously, and the stakes were higher throughout the course of the film, and there were less moments where the film's just kind of going along because of plot convenience. It never really explains why the sisters are able to survive being roasted alive in a kiln. It just, they're back to life. And you know, that's just a really lazy way to write a screenplay. But that being said, I do enjoy the film. I have fun with it. I do have more criticisms for the film than I had in the past, but I still enjoy the movie. It's entertaining. It's fairly fast paced. It's got some likable. It's got a fair amount of likable characters, even though the Sanderson sisters can get a little bit annoying and on your nerves. They still have some nice charm to them and some funny moments, especially the moments when they're trying to adapt to modern times, trying to figure out what's going on. And I like a lot of different aspects of the film in terms of the story, in terms of stuff like that. But I just feel the script could have been a lot better. The tone could have been more consistent, or should have had more things added to it. And as a horror comedy, there's not a lot of horror, and that was just something that I really think could have really raised this film to a whole other level. Some genuine scares, some genuine moments that chill your bones. The Haunted Mansion ride when you go to Disneyland or Disney World. I mean, it's pretty freaky. There are a lot of creepy, freaky moments, and there really wasn't anything like that in Hocus Pocus. And I feel that was a huge missed opportunity. And I think Disney should go back to something like this and do a freaky deaky horror film for teenagers again. I think that would be a fun idea. And instead of trying to be a poser and trying to say hip things and trying to be like make virgin jokes and stuff like that, put in some actual comedy and actual lines that teenagers actually say and things that they actually talk about. Uh, Otherwise, you sound like you're from another planet, and you're speaking a completely different language. And there were a lot of lines in this that felt like that. You're like, oh, it's just some grown man in his 40s trying to act like trying to act like he knows what the teenagers are into, and he knows what they like to say, and he knows the slang. But anyway, I don't know what else to say about Hocus Pocus, except if I were to rate out of 5 stars, I'd give it 3.5 out of 5. Above average, entertaining, fun movie, but like I said, it's just like eating too much Halloween candy, and then the next day you have a headache, you feel sick, and you're just like, I don't want any more of this Hocus Pocus. I think I've had enough. But didn't taste terrible. It wasn't a entirely unmemorable experience. It's just one of those things where you're like, I'm gonna hold off for a bit. But anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.